me putting my bell out.
Okay, we were looking at category codes, and now then subcategory codes, and then sub-classification codes. All right. So we saw how they work in Salmonella, and what I now want to do is move to the next section, because so far we have talked about chapters, we've talked about category codes, we've talked about subcategory, and we've talked about subclassification. But there's one thing we've missed, and that would be the sections. And I'm trying to fix this so my head isn't chopped off. That's why I'm having trouble. Or that I'm not just a bobbing head. All right, all right, now, you found the 001s to 139s. But immediately underneath that, do you see another boldface area that says intestinal infectious diseases? And that's code 001 to 009. Well, isn't that a part of 001 to 139? Yeah, it is. Well, if that is a section, that means it's got similar things together. You with me? What would the next section be? If that ends at 009, the next one would be 010. All right, so what is 010? It's tuberculosis, isn't it? And it goes through code 018. Well, is tuberculosis an infectious and parasitic disease? Yeah, it is. So you see how they've taken the chapter and divided it into smaller sections. All right, if 018 ends tuberculosis, what would the next code be? 019. Where is it? Is that 019?
It starts at 0 to 20.
Oh, but wait a minute. Tuberculosis ended at 018. There is no 019, and there's a reason. You tell me why there is no 019. Had this book for 30 years. It was only supposed to have lasted for 10, but for a number of reasons it got extended. What has happened in the 30 years, or even if it had been 10 years, what would have happened as far as new diseases?
I would think it just got left off.
No. Wasn't an accidental leaving off. Well, in your lifetime, have they learned about toxic shock syndrome?
Yes.
Have they learned about HIV and AIDS? Have they learned about Legionnaire's disease?
Yes.
They left some codes intentionally blank for the future. Because at any given time, we may develop another infectious and parasitic disease that isn't already taken into account in this code book, so they had to leave spaces for it.
So is my answer right for modification?
Pretty much. Yep, for the future, modifications. All right, so zoonotic bacterial diseases are code 020 to 27. Well, are zoonotic parasitic and infectious diseases? Yeah, they are. So once again, you see how you've got this big chapter. They divide it into sections. And I should have talked about this before we talked about the category codes, and I really forgot. So bear with me. We've got chapters that are broken down into sections. Sections that are broken down into category codes. Category codes that are broken into subcategory codes. And subcategory codes that are broken down into subclassification codes. The easier way to say it is we've got chapters divided into sections, which are divided into 3-digit codes, and 3-digit are divided into 4-digit, and 4-digit are divided into 5-digit. And that's as far as we take it, to the 5th digit. But when you have a 5th digit available, can you use the 4th digit code? No. When you have a 4th digit available, can you use the 3rd digit code? No. Got to take it to the fullest degree possible. And the entire book is arranged exactly as we've just seen it. They take every chapter, break it down into sections that are similar. Sections get broken down. All right, let's look at code 800 to see another example of it. Now, you already have learned that the 800 to 999 codes are the injuries and poisonings. So you can expect that one of the first, or actually the first section in the chapter for injury and poisoning is what? Fractures. So every fracture known to man is going to be coded somewhere between 800 and 829, isn't it? Wouldn't it really be nice if I could remember that, so that as I am coding a chart that has a fracture, I immediately know there's only 29, codes that it could be, and I could turn right to it and code. Well, that's how the book was originally authored. The book originally had just the tabular and didn't have the alphabetic, but you'll see why we have to have it. All right, now, when you look at these fractures, do you see all kinds of helpful hints like drawings? The drawings are put in there just to help you remember what you learned in anatomy and physiology. As you look at those, do you remember somewhere learning about the different types of fractures? Yep, you do. Do you remember learning about whether there was a closed fracture or an open fracture and the difference between them? Yep, you did. Turn the page. Do you remember learning about the parts of the skull and the parts of the TMJ joint? Yep. That's where all of those things were important, and that's why your A&P and your microbiology is critical to your coding. But if you forget, this particular brand of book gives you these diagrams. Now, I probably should have explained about the different brands of books. There are just thousands of different code books out there. It depends on which publisher printed it. There is one basic code book that has all the numbers in it. Then that's pretty much available free off the web. But I can tell you it wouldn't do you a whole lot of good because it doesn't have what I like to call the whistles and the bells. The whistles and the bells are the color coding that you see. They're the diagrams that you see. They're the little symbols that you see that you don't know what they mean yet. But that's what you're paying the big bucks for, is because the printer, the publisher of this book, took the time to go in and make those markings for each code so you would know what to do with it after you got there. And that's what you're paying for, is how they've indicated in that way. All right, so if we look at 800 to 829, what is the first breakdown or category codes under 800 to 829? It's fracture of skull, isn't it? So what are the category codes we would use for fracture of skull? 800 to 804. So 800 would be the vault of the skull. 801s are the base of the skull. 802s would be the face bones themselves. 803 would be others than what we've mentioned, and unqualified, meaning those we don't know more detail about. And 804 would be multiple fractures involving the skull or face with other bones. So you see how they took a fracture, decided then that this one little section was going to be for the skull, and then broke the skull down into the different parts of the skull. Now, within each of those parts, let's look at the fracture of the base of the skull, code 801. Then they've broken it down to whether it's a closed without mention of intracranial injury, or a closed with a cerebral laceration and contusion, or closed with subarachnoid, subdural, and extradural hemorrhage. All of those things make it a different type of fracture, don't they? Is a skull fracture of the base of the skull more of a problem if you've got a cerebral laceration, a cut of the brain? Yeah. Does it have more problems if you've got a subarachnoid hemorrhage to go along with it?
Yes.
Yeah, because that's a type of CVA, cerebrovascular accident or stroke. So each one of those is a different category telling us more information about it. Now look over at code 805 to 809. These are fractures of your neck and your trunk. And I'm particularly wanting you to look at 805